Okay, guys, I told you guys I had two books to read to you guys that dealt with conflict and resolution. So, the first book I'm going to read is The Juicebox Bully, and I'm going to do the best I can to read and make sure that you guys see the picture. So, hopefully, this will work out. Be patient with me. So, the Juicebox Bully. Of course, we've all heard the word bullies before. We might have even experienced a bully or know someone who's a bully. And hopefully, this will maybe give you a different point of view to look at someone who is a bully and how to handle that bully. Okay, let's get started. As Pete stood in front of his new class, Mr. Peltzer announced, "Let's welcome Pete to our team. Pete, you will be sitting behind Ralph." Settling into his seat, Pete pulled his hat down over his head so that only his eyes could be seen. Turning around, Ralph warned him, "They don't allow hats in class here." "You're not my mother," snarled Pete. So already he's not off to a great start. The kid was trying to nicely tell him not to wear a hat, and he's snapped at him already. After giving an assignment, Mr. Peltzer walked around the class and quietly asked Pete to remove his hat. Once he walked away, Pete poked Ralph. "Thanks a lot," he growled. Later that day at recess, Pete didn't ask to join the soccer game. Instead, he just watched. So he is the new kid, so it looks like he's just kind of watching on now, not really participating with anybody, not playing with anyone. "Hi, Pete," Ralph said. "Do you want to get in the game?" "Not with those nerds," Pete replied. "I don't like those kids." "What do you want to do?" asked Ralph. So Ralph has reached out to him again to try to play, and Pete did not have a very kind response to that. He's saying he doesn't like those kids, but he doesn't even know those kids. Pete smiled spitefully. "Let's steal the ball. We're bigger than them. We can have our own game." "I don't think so," answered Ralph. "That's not how we do things around here." "Then I'll do it myself," taunted Pete, "if you're so afraid." Pete ran over to the field and yelled, "Pass it to me." When David passed the soccer ball, Pete grabbed it and ran off the field. "What's going on?" shouted David. Pete didn't answer. He ran faster and faster. Then he turned and waved the ball in the air. At first, the kids just stood there. Then they huddled together before walking over to Pete. Ruby and Lucy led the way. So he has kind of tricked them into giving him the ball, and then he stole it. He doesn't have any intentions of playing or giving it back. That's definitely not a kind thing to do. "I know you're new around here, but what are you doing?" asked Ruby. "I'm playing with the soccer ball," Pete snapped. "Think you're going to take it away from me?" Ruby didn't argue, nor did she threaten Pete. Instead, she softly but firmly said, "It's your first day here, so there's no way you could know this. In Mr. Peltzer's class, we made a promise." So she's very calmly talking to him. She's not yelling or fighting back or trying to rip the soccer ball out of his hand. "We promise to take care of ourselves, each other, and our classroom, and to solve problems peacefully. We promise that in this class, no one would stand by and accept bad behavior. When someone acts hurtfully, we all speak up. We want to be a member of the class and to make the same promise." So that's actually a pretty good policy to have, that they all made a promise to respect each other, to stand up for each other, treat each other kindly. And she's saying that she wants Pete to take that promise also. Dumb rules, dumb promises. Throwing the ball to the ground, Pete walked away. Doesn't seem like he's getting along with everyone very well. The next day, Pete ate alone. When he finished lunch, the kids raced out of the lunchroom while Pete trailed behind. Ruby ran up to Pete and asked, "Do you want to play soccer today?" "I don't play with nerds." "Okie dokie," Ruby replied. "Hey, Ruby," Pete called after her. Ruby stopped and turned around. "Nice shirt," Pete complimented. Then he squirted his juice box right at her. Now this really, this Pete kid is something else, because Ruby's done nothing but try to be nice to him. She even asked him again, like, "Hey, new day, you want to play soccer?" And when he could have just simply said no thanks, he's snapping at her, and now he squirted his juice all over her. "You are so mean," she shrieked at him. "I'll tell everybody how mean you are. You won't have any friends here." And I can see why she'd be upset. I'd be upset too if someone did that to me for no reason at all. By now, Ralph, David, and some others had come up to them. "Ruby, I won't let you do that," Ralph said clearly. "Remember our promise?" "I don't want to remember the promise. Look what he did. We'll ignore him forever until he leaves this school and goes back to his old school," Ruby demanded. So Ruby and Pete definitely had some conflict, and can you see why maybe Ruby does want to be mean to Pete now? I definitely can. But I'm sure you guys have probably heard the expression, two wrongs don't make a right. Just because he's being mean to all of them, Ruby doesn't need to turn around and act like him. She needs to be the bigger person and still try to treat him with kindness. Ralph walked between Ruby and Pete. "We're not going to do this, Ruby. I know you're angry. You can tell Mr. Peltzer if you want, but we're not going to let you treat Pete like this, and we won't put up with his bad behavior either." Ruby stomped away, leaving Pete and Ralph behind. "No one's ever done that before," Pete said. "Why did you stand up for me? I've been in your shoes, and I learned that being a bully doesn't work." So surprisingly, when they kind of stepped up and said, "Hey, Ruby, we're not going to let you treat Pete the way he treated you," Pete was kind of surprised by that, because I think he was probably expecting everybody to then yell at him, get mad at him, try to fight him, because that's probably what he's used to. "And I'm not a bystander," Ralph said. "I don't stand by and let mean things happen. Besides, Ruby is my friend, and you shouldn't have ruined her shirt." So even though he's not letting Ruby be mean to Pete, he's also not going to let Pete get away with being mean to his friends. "Won't the other kids be mad at you for sticking up for me?" Pete asked. "No way. They all made the same promise. We talked about it for a long time with Mr. Peltzer, and every kid here tries to keep that promise." This is definitely a different way to take it, because your first reaction, if someone's being mean or does something mean to you, you want to do something back to them. You want to get even. You want to get revenge. But does that really solve the problem? Not really. Now, if someone's hurting you, should you tell an adult, a teacher? Absolutely. But don't let someone else's bad behavior turn your behavior bad. "At my old school, I got picked on all the time," Pete said. "Everybody just let it happen. So I started to tease kids before they could be mean to me. Ralph replied, "We decided that when someone tries to bully, no one will stand by and let it happen. We speak up or we ask for help from an adult, but we won't be bystanders to bad behavior." So Pete just revealed something interesting about himself. He said at his old school he was bullied. So when he moved to a new school, he didn't want to be bullied, so he picked on and was mean to other kids before they had a chance to be mean to him. So he was kind of repeating the bad behavior of other people. But this new class, they're trying to stop that. They're not going to bully someone back just because they bully them. But like you said, they're also not going to be bystanders. If they see someone being mean to their friends, they're going to stand up for them. That's not okay. The bell rang and it was time to go back to class. "They hate me. They'll never let me play with them," Pete said. Before Ralph could answer, David, Lucy, and Ruby came toward them. "I'm sorry about what I said," Ruby apologized. "I can't believe I forgot the reason why we made the promise. If we can remember to stand up for each other, school is a lot more fun." "Wow, the kids here are so different than at my other school," Pete said. "Maybe I'll give this promise thing a try." "Great, let's go talk to Mr. Peltzer," said Ruby. "Hey, Ruby, sorry about your shirt," Pete added. Ruby smiled. "No worries, I kinda like the new look." Everyone laughed as Pete and Ruby led the way into class. And that is the end. So as you can see, there was definitely conflict in this book. And they could have gone about it two ways. They could have turned around and been mean to Pete, just like Pete was treating them. Or they could have tried to teach him like, "Hey, Pete, let's try doing it our way, the way we do it at our school. We don't treat others like that. We treat each other with kindness." And luckily for them, that worked out well because Pete saw, hey, these people are forgiving me. They're accepting me. So they turned this conflict into kind of a positive outlook. So there is this story. I hope you guys enjoyed it.